Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I am Mr. Kadim Khan and I am a lecturer in the Institute of Computing, Kuwait University of Science and Technology. Today we will take lecture number 19 of the subject of software quality engineering, in which we are going to discuss the software test documentation. Dear student, this lecture is very much important for you because for the final year students projects you create multiple documentations and the test documentation is very much important. So in this lecture we are going to discuss different sort of the software test documentation required for the testing purpose. This is the discussion agenda. It contains the topics of the test documentations. Then we have IEEE standard for 8 to 9 software test documentations. This is the International Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering's templates for software test documentation. Then we have the relations of the test documents to the testing process. That is the IEEE 8 to 9 standards relationship between the test document and the test process. Then we have test case specification templates. Here we will design the sample test case. Then we have IEEE 8 to 9 test plan templates. Then we have the overall structure of the status reports of the software testings. Then also we have the overall structure of the common report of the software testings. And then we have the defect report form and overall test report form. Test documentations. Basically, we require multiple sort of the documentation in the testing phase. So maintaining the proper documentation is very much important aspects of any software test efforts. So we must have to maintain all these documentations so that this documentation will be used for the future reference. Now, what is the purpose of the test documentations? There are multiple purposes of the test documentation. First one is to plan and guide the testing activities. All these documentation are used for the planning purpose and also that will help for the guidelines for the testing activities. Next, reports on test progress. Many documentations provides us reports about the test progress. The reports includes that how many tests are conducted, what are total number of tests and how many tests are remaining. So the test documentation provides us the good test progress about the software systems. Also, the test documentation are used to assess the product quality and to achieve the conformance with the standards and regulations. Basically, without the documentation, we cannot get the quality of any task. So, for the higher quality obtaining, we require a certain good documentation as well that will explain each and every aspects of the particular activities. So, test documentation are used to assess the product quality and also used to achieve the conformance with the standards and regulations. Test documentation serve as the management decisions making tools. So basically all these documentation act as a tools for making different sort of the decisions that whether we have requires more testing or whether these tests are in fact very much sufficient. So we require test documentations. Various test documentation templates and standards are available. So we have different sort of the test documentation and templates, including the IEEE test documentation, that is IEEE 8 to 9 test documentations. So we have, in fact, the main issue is to consider the cost of maintaining such documentation, which should be weighted against the product's requirements. So we require certain cost to maintain these documentations, and we suggest that these documentation should be in the form of the soft documentation or in the form of a certain software system which prepare or maintain these all documentations. IEEE has a standard documentations. Basically, IEEE is a publisher and it is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering. IEEE has defined standard 8 to 9 documentation for the software testing. and initially it is published by the IEEE in 1983. But later on, the American National Standard Institute has approved an updated version of the IEEE Standard 829 documentation for software testing. Now, IEEE Standard 829 defines different sort of the documentation which include these. Number one, test plan. This is the documentation which is required before the software testing, and it includes the plan for the software testing. The planning includes the objective of the software testings, then the strategies required to conduct the testings, then different resources required to perform the software testing. It also includes the test cases as well. And next is the test design specifications. This documentation defined the designing of the test cases. So here, different sorts of the test cases are in fact designed here. Third one is test case specifications. Here, after designing the test, then the test cases are specified here, which includes inputs, actual output, and the expected output of the particular product. Then we have the test procedure specifications. Here, all the procedures are defined here. Then we have the test item transmittal reports. That means that all items which are required to be tested, they are properly transmitted to the software quality assurance office. Next, we have the test logs. The test logs is in fact an automated files which is created during the testing, and that files which is created by the tools which run the software test. In that log files contains different information about the software testings. For example, the times when the software is tested, that is the time of the testing, the dates of the testings, the persons who have tested the softwares, the platform of the testing, similarly the input and output of the testings, and the pass or fail criteria of the testings. Test incident reports. If there are certain test incidents, then that is also reported. The test incidents means that the problems in the software testings. Next, it is the test summary reports. In the test summary reports, we have a summarized and brief information of the overall testings. Relationship of test documentation to the testings. Now, test documentation has a certain relations with the testing process, which is in fact defined by IEEE 829. So, first of all, we create the project documentations, and also we create the item documentations, and at the same times we also create the test items. The test items are those components which are required to be tested. So we have project documentation, which is in fact the project specification documents. Also we have the item documentations. Item documentation includes the different unit informations, and also we have the test items, means that the list of different items which are required to be tested. Now project informations and the test documentation are combined with the test plans. So there is the plans is created, and then from the test plans we create the test design specifications. Now the test plans include the objectives of the testings. Then also we have include the strategies or techniques required to perform the test in the test plans. Also we have the resources required to conduct the testings. Now from the test plans we create test design specifications. Here we will design all the specifications of the testing. Then also we have another test design specification, means that there may be one or multiple test design specification documents. Now from the test design specification documents, we create the test case specifications. The test case specifications include different test cases, and these test cases are in fact containing information such as that inputs required for the testings. The input means the input test data, and the output is in fact the output which is created from the testing, and also the expected output of the systems. From the test design specification, we also include test procedure specification. Now the test procedures contains the techniques which is required for the testings. For example, JUnit is a techniques which is an automated testing procedures for the software testing in Java environment. Now also we have the test items. Test items is not the documentation, it contains the list of multiple items to be tested. Now from the test items we create test item transmittal reports. Test item transmittal reports includes different items which are required to be tested, and these tested items are properly transmitted are transferred to the software quality assurance office, and then the testing should be performed. Now, test item transmittal reports and test procedure specifications are in fact act as an input for the test executions. Here we will practically execute the software testings. So it includes different sort of the procedures and the automated methods which are used to perform the test executions. From the test execution, we take two different outputs. First of one is called the test incidental reports, and the second one is the test log. Test incidental reports means that when the test is occurring, there may be certain problems. The incidents which will arise during the testings. These incidents are properly reported in the test incident reports, and also from the test execution we create the test logs because the testing is automated. So we create the test logs here. The test logs are automated files created by the computers which include information about the testings. The information about the testings includes such as the test date, test times, the persons who have tested the softwares, the environment of the softwares where the testing is performed, and similarly the input, output, and expected results, and the pass-fail criteria and actual results of the testings. Now test incidental report and test logs are combined with each other to create one document that is called test summary reports. In fact, the test summary report is created from the test incidental reports and test log reports. The test summary reports gives us the quick idea about the software testings. So test summary contains the brief information about the software testing. Now this is the test case specification template of the IEEE 829 documentation. It includes the build number. The build numbers means that the test run number or the attempt number. That means that what is the particular test case number. Then we have the tester name. Tester name is the person who is responsible for software testing for this test cases. Then we have the test type. Test types includes that the types required to run the test. For example, we have the white box test or the black box test or the unit test or integration testing. So here we define the types of test. Then we have test case name. Test case name is a particular name for this test case. For example, testing the insertions for the book in the library management system, or for example testing the marks DMC or the marks sheets created by the system, that whether this system is creating the accurate and exact DMC according to the user expectation or not. Then we have test case number. It defined the test case number of the system. Then we have test case description. Here we will just describe the current testing system of this test case. For example, if we are testing the online ordering systems, so here we will describe that we are testing the credit card amount or the payment system for this particular software systems. So here we will describe the system under test in a few sentences. Next is items to be tested. Here we will write certain items which are required to test. For example, login item, insertion, login page, insertion page, similarly searching page, etc. So all these items are identified and defined here properly in a certain orders. So better is to write the items as in the sequence which is occurring in the software system. For example, first we have the login form, then we have the main page, then we have the for example admission page, etc. Next is the specification of software testings, which includes inputs and expected outputs. For example, if the input for the power is 2 and 4, so power of 2 raised to power 4 is 16, so the expected output should be 16. And here is the procedural steps. Procedural steps means that the procedures which is adopted to perform the testing. That first we have provide the inputs, then second phase we have click on the button, in the third steps we have read the outputs, and next and so on, and in the final steps we have compared this in output with the expected output. So that will be in fact a very brief and test cases of the IEEE. Now this is the examples of the test case. For example, build number is P6 underscore 306, that is the page 6 of the 306. Next is the tester name, John Abbott has performed the testings. Next is the types of test. For example, it is the unit test, it can be the integration test, white box test, crystal box test, and similarly the glass box tests are the usability test. Similarly, we have the test case names, test can get other. So it contains the name of the test case, that this is the get other function or a modules, and it is in fact a test. So test get other is the name of the test. Then we have test case number. Here we will define the test case number. So in the one build there can be multiple test case numbers. This is TC0014 test case number. Next we have test case descriptions. In the test case description we will describe this testing process in a few sentences. It can be one sentence or more than one sentence, but it should be very much brief. So testing that the get other method of the class patent.java retrieve the patent's author's names for the patent documentation. So basically this provides the author name for the particular patents in the patent documentation. So here the description is provided. Next is the items to be tested, means that we are going to test two items. So here we will list down all the items which are required to be tested in this particular test cases. So first one is the check that the method returns null if the name is not set yet. So if we do not provide the names of the other, then it should return the null value. Similarly, test that one can set the other's name with the set other and then retrieve it with the get other. So by the set other it takes the input, and by the get other it retrieve or provide the outputs in the form of the name of the other. Next one is the specification. Here we will write the inputs and the expected output. The input will, for example, if here if the null value is provided, then the input should be void, and expected output is author's name as strings, which is entered with the set author function. This is the coding function and set other names takes the name of the other or the null if not set yet. If the value is not provided, then it can also takes the null values. Now procedures test means create a new pattern.java instance. First we have created during the testing the instance of the pattern.java. Then we have called the method get author and ensure that the return value is null. So if the value is null, then the get author name is function is called, and then the set other names takes the inputs from the get others, and then the get other functions will ensures that the name of the others are enters, and the get and set function will ensures that they are the same name or the same input. Now, IEEE 29 test plans as a templates, which is a standard template defined by Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering. It contains the introduction, that is the introduction about the software testings. Then we have test items, the item required to be tested, features to be tested, and feature not to be tested. Certain features of the items tested and few features of the items are not tested. Maybe these features are in fact depending on another module, so that's why after another modules are completed, then this test can be performed. Next are the approaches of a software testing, which includes code inspection testings. That means that the code is inspected, unit testings, unit by unit, the software is tested, system testing, all the system is tested when the proper units are integrated with each other. Then we have the regression testings. Regression testing means that when the system is maintained, then what is the response of the system or capability of the system. And finally, if the acceptance testing, which is conducted by the end user to accept the software system in his or her environment. In the sixth part, we have the item pass or fail criteria. He will identify different pass or fail criteria for the items. Next, we have suspension criteria and resumption requirements of the system. That means that if we want to suspend the test and when we want to resume the testing, what should be the criteria? That when the particular objects or the modules are not available for us, then the system will be or the testing will be suspended, and when these will be available for us, then the system or testing will be resumed. Then we have test deliverables. Test deliverables mean that what are the deliverables of the testing, means that what sort of the productions will be created by the test or the results of the test. Next we have the testing task. That is the task required to perform the testings. Here we will identify different sort of the procedures and techniques which will be required to do the testings. Next we have the environmental needs. Environmental needs means that the current operating hardware and software environment which will be required for the testing procedures. Next we have responsibilities, means that different people required for the testing, and staffing and training required for the testing, means that the people which will be required for the testing and their training requirements. Here we will identify the timetables for the testing, that is the schedule of the testing. And next is the risk and contingencies of the testing, means that different sort of the problems that may arise during the testing and what are their catastrophic effects on the software testing. Next we have the approvals of the testing. Approval means that if this test is suggested by some higher responsible peoples, then their approval is very much important. And next we have to-do list. To-do list means that if we have to do certain other activities that can also be added after the 15 steps. And at the end we have the revision history. Revision history means that if we have to revise all this system or provide the brief summary about the testing, then it can be in the revision history. The overall structure of the status report. This document is very much complicated documents because It defines different risks and responsibilities. Similarly, the progress against the plans and the project bugs matrix and also different and no fixed bugs to approval reports. So there are four parts and each part starts with a separate page. So each and every part should be in fact documented on the separate pages. The first one is called risk and responsibilities. The risks and responsibilities include different factors which will affect the quality, cost, or schedule of the project. And the responsibilities include different people required to perform the testing. So it highlights that there are certain if problems are not. If the problems are there, then all these problems are documented in the overall structures of the status reports. For example, artifacts due to into which the testing but not arrived. For example, if the certain artifacts which are due into testing but they are not provided on the right time of the software testing, and the artifacts that are due out of testing but not yet completed. So when certain items which are not completed and that should be completed for that particular schedule. Also, we have the staff turnover that threatens the schedules. Means that the people who are required to perform the testing are the responsibilities and they are not available for the testing. And equipment acquisition problems that might threaten the software's testing schedules. These equipments, which are very much important, which include different tools and technologies for the software system, and they are not properly available with us. Next is the progress against the planned document of the status report. Basically, it includes the progress which should be in fact uh, cross-checked with the plan. It can be the documented in the table format. It includes the components which is required to be tested. Then we have the test types, for example, integration test, unit test, component test. Then we have the name of the testers or the person who will test the software system. Then we have total test plan slash created. So all the test plans which contain in fact here we will identify the total of the tests which are planned here. For example, in a 1 week we will perform the 20 tests. Similarly, we have test pass fail or block criteria. That is certain tests which are passed, another test which are failed, and another test which are blocked. The pass tests will be those tests which identify the defects, and failed tests are those tests which do not identify any sort of the test defects, and the block tests are those tests which are not executed. Next are the time and budget required to perform the test. So time budget means that different schedule requires for performing the test. For example, a component requires 2 hour testing. Similarly, these components are requires 1 week test because this is much complicated than the previous one. And the time spent on the testing are also documented here. The project effort for the next builds mean that the people are the efforts which are required to complete the project. If there are certain problems, then how many peoples and their working hours required to perform the efforts for the next maintenance. Next one is the notes. Notes are the description about the test planning. So here we will write a brief description about the overall this test. So also note that this covered the progress against the plan because here you can see that we have a planned test cases and how many tests are performed, are blocked and are failed. So we have to in fact monitor the progress against the plan. So risk, obstacles, efforts, results all in one chart. So you can see that all problems are in a one table. So that is a very effective methods to represent the progress against the plans for software testing. Next is the project bug matrix. The project bug matrix consists of the different bugs that are identified in the system during the testing. So these charts shows to find and fix the rates over the course of the project. So if we have to identify certain errors, then we also have to provide the fixed rates of these errors. So all these defects and problems and errors are identified, and also the fixing methodologies is defined here. It is very much useful to give a sense of the rate at which the problems are being repaired. So also we have to provide the repairing rate of the problems. If the repair rate is near the end of the project is slow compared to the find rates, the schedule is at the rest. So means that when the schedule is at rest, then there will be the repairing rates are quite slow as compared to the finding rates. Now, the bugs counts and extents of the testing is in fact provided are represented in the form of a graph here. So it attempts to measure the testing progress by plotting a project's bugs number against the theoretical curves here and to find the rates or the times. So there we will mention the bugs per weeks means that 20 bugs, 30 bugs, 40, and here we will mention the times on the which the bugs are identified. Based on that times we identify the bugs. So this represents that the peak is here. So it means that the maximum bugs are identified in this particular weeks, while the minimum bugs are identified in that particular week. Deferred and no change approval request. So this is a part of the status reports where we will provide that the information about the deferred test or no change approval request. In fact, it contains that no changes required or this particular functionality is deferred. So every project team fixes some bugs and rejects or defers the bugs. So if there are certain bugs, then the um, testing team will in fact um, suggest that these bugs should be corrected or these bugs should be deferred or no changes are required for these particular bugs. So if there are no problem, automatically no change approval request will be provided by the testing teams. So in fact, it saves up the list of the end of the project. So list the new not to be fixed or change request are the every weeks. So at the end of the testing, we can provide all these information or during the each and every phase of the software test, we can also provide this information to the project manager. Next one is the defect report form. This is a form which is the test report defect report form. It contains the software tested. The software being tested, it will contain the name of the software which is required to be tested. Next is the date. The date is the date on which this particular test has occurred. Next is the defect found name types. It contains the names of the defects and there are also the types of the defects that has been found in the softwares being tested. Next is the location found or the unit module. So it contains the location of the defects that on which particular line number of the software code this defect has been identified. So it contains the individual unit or the system module in which the defect was found. Next one is the severity of the defects. It contains the critical, major or the minor errors. So the critical means that the system cannot run without this correction, while the major means that the defects will be impact the availability of or the accuracy of the operation, while the minor means that it will not affect the operations. Next one is the defects, the types of defects. The type of defects mean missing, wrong or extra. That whether these defects represent something like that this functionality is missing or this functionality is wrong or this functionality is extra or not required. Next one is the test date script location. Test date script location means that the test date on which the test has been conducted. So there we will identify the test dates are the script or location defects. Next is the origin of the test or the phase of the development. Here the phase in which the software is tested. Next is the date corrected means that defects correction date, that when that particular defect has been corrected. A date of retest, when the retest has been performed, then we will defines or we will write here the date when the retest will be performed or retest has been performed. Next is result of retest. Here we will provide the result of the retest, that what is the result, whether that test has identified that the certain problem or bugs are still there, then we will provide the result of the retest here. And then we have the overall test reports. So here we will provide the test status reports are produced regularly during the test process. It contains overall the process, overall test reports, summary and analysis of the results are documented here. In the overall test reports, we have the scope, which contains the identifications, system overview, and document overview. So means that here we will define the scope of the testings or the products. Means that here we will identification of the defects or the bugs. Then system overview, what is the overview of overall system? That means that what is the purpose of the system. Documentation overview means that here we will provide the brief summary about the documentations in the testing. Different documentation reference documentation. Here we will provide certain other documents which will be act as a reference to it. So if you are if the project managers is providing another reference here, for example software design description document or software requirement specification document, then the reference will be provided in the section number 2. Next we have the overview of test results. Here we will provide the results of the testings. It includes overall assessment of the software tested, means that overall whether this software is passed or fail, or it has a good quality or a medium quality or a poor quality. Impact of testing environments. When the environment will be changed, what will be the impact of the testings? For example, if we have the Linux environment and then we are changed that environment to the Microsoft, what will be the impact of the testing? Next, recommended improvements. So if there are certain problems which are defects are identified, here we will recommend the improvement in the testing. Next we have detailed test results. Here we will define the results of the software testing. It includes project unique identifier of a test. Project unique identifier is in fact a unique key which represents the test. For example, test 4.128. So and also we can define the name of the products that has been tested. For example, test 4.128 underscores login page. It includes summary of the test results, problem encounters, and project unique identifier for all the test cases, deviation from test case procedures, and the project's unique identifiers of the test cases. The summary of the test results means that the brief summary that will be provided for the reference purpose. Problem encountered during the software testings. All these problems which are encountered during the testings in the projects are listed down here, and also we will provide the unique identifier of the test cases, that the test numbers is provided here. Deviation from the test case or procedures. If we are deviating or we are moving towards another sides from the planned procedure and test cases, then we will describe it here. And at the end we have project unique identifier of the test cases. Here we will provide the unique identifier for the projects, and that will be used as a reference purpose. Fifth is the test logs. Test logs is in fact automated files which contains different information about the software testing, which include the input and output of the testings. And similarly, we have the different informations including the whether this test has been passed or failed. Six is the notes, and the notes include abbreviation and acronyms. Different sort of the abbreviation and acronyms, which will be the standard abbreviation and acronyms of the software engineering. These are provided here in the 6.1 section of the overall test reports. And at the end, we have the appendix. Appendix contains the additional data. For example, references, similarly software references, similarly web references, or any other informations for this documentation. Dear students, this is the end of the lectures. If you have any questions, you can ask that question through the email. I will wait for your questions and will respond immediately as soon as I get them. And these are two important books. You should study these books, and these are automated books. In fact, are used tools approached by the Mark Owen Uting and Bruno Leggers. These books are very much important. And if you have questions, you can ask these questions through the email. My email is m.kadim@kust.edu.pk. I will wait for your question and will respond immediately as soon as I get them. Thank you very much.